Theater Talk is made possible in part by the CUNY TV Foundation. From New York City, this is Theater Talk. I'm the show's producer, Susan Haskins.
And I'm Michael Riedel of the New York Post.
We've invited some of our favorite Broadway pundits to talk about the performers and shows that made a big impression on them this season.
So stay with us tonight for our Critics' Cavalcade.
This hamster makes the most god-awful racket all night long and then spends the whole day fast asleep. Henry was in a lot of pain last night. He was being driven crazy by the noise that the hamster was making. And to tell you the truth, I've wanted to get rid of it for a while now. So I said to myself, okay, that's it, and I took it and I put it in the street.
John, you interviewed James Gandolfini for Vanity Fair. You got to spend time with him. You, I think, rode around in a car with him. What do you make of him? I mean, people are so in love with that character, Tony Soprano. Is he Tony Soprano?
I don't know. He's an actor. So I liked him enormously. I think he's absolutely modest, completely natural. Camera shy in many ways, doesn't like interviewing at all. One of the very, very few actors I've interviewed who's actually asked me a question.
What did he ask you?
All about me, you know, he just was curious.
But that's a deflective way of sort of...
Only if you're cynical. You know, I didn't think he needed to do that. In other words, he wanted a conversation rather than to talk about himself, particularly. He's not an egotist in that way, isn't the usual image of a superstar. He's a very self-effacing, great guy. I really liked him, which is not so often that happens.
What of his performance in God of Carnage?
Fun.
Yeah.
It's enormous fun.
And what?
I mean, he's a very skilled stage actor. People seem to think he's never acted on stage. He began on stage, in fact. His career just was made by The Sopranos, but he was a very, very good and well-respected, unknown character actor.
The real hero of God of Carnage is the casting director. They have cast that show brilliantly. They have got an audience that never goes to the theater. They've seen James Gandolfini, who actually, he's quite good in the show. I mean, they wouldn't have cast him if he wasn't any good, but the man is selling tickets.
But isn't it like Chinese food, though? I mean, there's not much really going on in that play, is there?
The other hero of the show
is Matthew
Warchus, the director.
Yeah.
I mean, the director has spun that beautifully. He's been able to do that, not only in that show, but also in the Norman Conquests.
I was going to say, this is the year of Matthew Warchus, because he directed the God of Carnage and he directed the 7-hour Norman Conquest. Every second is just extraordinarily directed.
Good evening! I heard you were dressing for dinner. Good evening. Carry on. Talk among yourselves.
No, Norman, not there.
Is that my father's suit you've got on? If he was a man with extraordinary arm and inside leg measurements, yes indeed.
Matthew Warchus, to me, is the hero of the season. I love his work because it really shows what a great director can bring to a play. I don't think God of Carnage, the play, and Norman Conquest are that, as plays, they're just not that interesting to me. And Boing Boing last year. And I loved all three productions because he completely transmogrifies the material with such precision and a great eye for the way people move on stage.
Bishops walking diagonally!
I love Norman Conquests. It's probably the best thing around at the moment, or at any moment, perhaps. It's beautifully acted, brilliantly directed. It has everything.
It's a faultless ensemble work and exciting to watch. Exciting to watch it all happen in front of you.
Excuse me! I'm sorry to interrupt, but can you just confirm I'm seeing what I think I'm seeing?
Hey, Annie! Annie!
Oh, go away! Well, throw a bucket of water over them or something!
Annie! Right, two can play at that game. Two can play at that. I love you too.
Do you think the British directors are head and shoulders above American directors on the whole?
Absolutely not.
Why?
And it's a snobism to take them en bloc, en masse, and say they're better. I mean, look, what frequently happens is they go wrong. I don't think, for instance, Tony Page, who's a veteran British director, does a good job with Godot at all.
Why?
Why? Well, first of all, it has an appalling set. It's ludicrous. I mean, the curtain goes up and you're in a moonscape of bad plastic rocks all over the place. It's completely opposite to the meaning of the play, actually, which must be set in a void. So already there you have a dumbing down, but the two leads weren't really acting on the same planet.
Nathan Lane and Bill Irwin.
Nathan Lane and Bill Irwin. You basically, you have, you know, good old reliable Nathan, and he's great. His note is a great note, and with a mime. And the depths of the play, the tragedy of the play, are completely absent.
I loved Waiting for Godot. I thought this was the Waiting for Godot by which I will measure all other Waiting for Godots. And I really think that, as far as I'm concerned, it was the best production I'd seen.
Funny, the more you eat, the worse it gets.
With me, it's just the opposite.
In other words?
I get used to the muck as I go along.
Waiting for Godot, as they say in this production, may be a masterpiece, but I don't know that you can tell from this production.
Why?
I found that the two main actors were mainly doing things I had seen them do
Nathan
before.
Lane and Bill
Nathan
Irwin.
Lane and Bill Irwin. The two smaller parts, I think, are much easier to do.
Played by
John Goodman, I think, is tremendous.
I am Pozzo! Pozzo!
And John Glover, I think, is tremendous.
I disagree that they were doing the same thing they've always done. I believe that they were working together and doing the traditional vaudeville routines in a way that had a melancholy to it and a joy in it that I never saw, and I don't particularly like clowns. I don't really like the routines part, and they were touching me. And I thought that as a company, that they were working together as if they had been together forever. So I loved it.
It's one of those plays that critics always say nothing happens twice. And that's true. In the first act, nothing happens. In the second act, nothing happens. But we've got a pretty classy quartet of actors on stage in this show.
The skull, the skull, the skull! In Connemara, in spite of the tennis, the labours abandoned, left unfinished! The skull, alas, the stones!
I mean, these guys are a classy bunch. And to see them do it, to see Nathan restrain himself, to do a performance that doesn't rely on shtick, and yet he's funny. And he's got the language down, and Bill Irwin has that natural pathos. He's just terrific.
Critics may love all of this existential stuff, but audiences are going to be bored by it.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, the roundabout crowd is a pretty tough crowd. The night I went, I was actually kind of astonished to see the crowd cheering the show.
I think they didn't have their hearing aids properly adjusted. They were all, half of them were twittering with their hearing aids. You know, I have a little theory about this. The French gave up on theater. There's no theater in Paris. They gave up on theater about 1952 when they had a 1-2 punch. Beckett and Ionesco.
Waiting for Godot.
Beckett, Waiting for Godot. Ionesco with
Exit the King.
And now, 60 years later, Americans do things a little bit later than French people do. 6 years later, we have two of these shows which were raved about by some of the major critics. Everyone's going to go to them. Everyone's going to hate them, and everyone will decide they're never going to the theater again. The end. No more theater.
I wanna rock, I want to rock, yeah, I wanna...
The thing is, if it's not for you, it's not for you. Is it Rock of Ages, for instance?
Yes.
I mean, I thought that was the end. I thought, what are they doing? I mean, it was like being in New Jersey. No offense to New Jersey, but the thing is, it was a terrible, terrible show.
Rock of Ages advances the art of musical theater beyond anything we've seen before.
Why is that?
Well, because it's such fun, actually. So
The minor detail.
It's a complete mess, you know, and the director was nominated for a Tony Award.
Over Arthur Lawrence.
Over Arthur Lawrence, 91 years old, great genius. But no, she was selected, and the thing is a complete mess. They serve drinks during the show, you know, which may not be a bad idea these days. It's a complete mess, but it's such fun. They communicate the fun, and this was not my music exactly, but I loved it.
1980s, yeah.
Yeah, I loved it, and I thought they kept it up all the way through. So I was very surprised to like it, but I did like it.
But Mike, you're an expert on the musical theater. Is this an important show?
I plead ignorance about this Rock of Ages. In the 1980s, I was listening to Hello Dolly and Fiddler on the Roof.
Nerd.
So I'll admit it. So I was totally lost in that show. I knew not one song.
You're kidding. Those are the songs that everybody danced to in my high school. You didn't know a single song, a hit song from the 1980s?
I was dancing to Gypsy and the Sound of Music. And maybe
nerd.
Maybe Fiorello.
I think these songs reached us all by,
osmosis somehow, yeah.
Because I found myself humming the lyrics. Who knew I knew those lyrics? I didn't even know what group, Water Snakes or whatever the group was. But it was, they were there. They were in my mind.
Here's the frightening thing, Mike. Does this start a trend of these kind of jukebox musicals all over again?
Rock of Ages is sort of a watered-down Mamma Mia, which is going down some. I mean, it really, it cuts everything down to another level, like subterranean practically. And I don't know, it does appeal to a certain demographic, and you can drink during the show, which certainly gets people going. And the cast is fine.
The cast, I'm told, drinks during the show too.
I don't know.
That could only help. It could only help.
But, you've got Constantine Maroulis, Tony nominee. And Amy Spanger, she's got a great body. She looks terrific on stage. So
basically you're telling me that the bar has been so lowered by Rock of Ages.
Yes. I don't know where we can go now. I mean, is it music of the 90s?
Yep.
I'm afraid so. I think we're going to get it.
Yep.
I may be too old for Rock of Ages, and if so, I don't care.
A lot of the critics gave 9 to 5 a real pounding, but you liked it.
Yeah, I like 9 to 5 because I think it perfectly fulfilled its contract of delivering an agreeable commercial musical. And for what it is and for what it aims to be, it really succeeds.
But what does it aim to be? Does it aim that high?
It aims to be an enjoyable night at the theater, an enjoyable musical. I don't think it aims to redefine the genre. It's entertainment, and as such, it perfectly works. I was pretty happy with it, and I really didn't feel like I wasted my time seeing it.
What do you think about Dolly Parton's score? Can she write musical theater songs?
I really think she does. In fact, I think she's been writing musical theater songs from the very beginning, since Jolene. The songs she writes are all story-based, and of all the pop songwriters around, she was one of the most naturally fitted for that.
Not to sound sexist, but I've been told that women seem to respond to this musical 9 to 5 more than men do. Is that a fair point?
I think it's fair. I think it's based on completely unscientific polling of friends who've seen it and who are women. They really enjoyed it, and the fact is the critics are overwhelmingly male, and we look at a show. It would be insane to pretend that we don't look at a show through the lens of who we are.
So for you, it's Dolly Parton who is the engine of the show, who really delivers the goods.
It is Dolly Parton, and it is the cast. It's really very good cast.
It's kind of like Wicked for the over 35 female. There's some kind of a delicious pleasure in seeing Mark Kudish get justice meted out. And it's a lot more fun, actually, than the film that's become so iconic. There's a lot more than moving around a corpse in a back seat. Dolly's music is delightful. It stays with you. And there's a real adrenaline rush, actually, in seeing women bond together. It is a sisterhood as powerful musical. It's a shame that so many men reviewing that can't see it. They missed Wicked. I think they've missed 9 to 5. I hope women go despite them, because they'll find, as I did, a surprisingly good time.
So does this mean, Matt, that male critics are sexist? Because they don't like 9 to 5.
No, it does not at all. I actually like Wicked, and the fact is 9 to 5 is just a bad musical. The music did not...
You are sexist!
The music did not
male.
stay with me, other than the title song. I can't remember anything really from it, other than the fact that I found it soapy and generic and just plain pitiful to actually listen to.
Barbara,
I have
defend
to
this
say,
show.
I like the spirit of it, and I thought that there were a lot of... to have your pulse beat a little harder, to see the women triumph, to see them bond together, to see Allison Janney, a woman who sings worse than I do, be nominated for Best Actress, Leading Actress in a Musical, does give one hope.
She's in the Rex Harrison
She's in Rex
category.
Harrison mode. May I say, she looks spectacular in that white pantsuit.
So do you really think, though, that this musical it will divide men and women, that women just like to see women stick it to the boss?
I don't think so, but I think that women sticking it to the boss, as creatively done, is fine. But I am struck by how it divided among gender lines in
Was
this
it
case.
really that
much
divided,
as Wicked.
though?
I think it was
It
divided.
got panned. I can't think of one good review it
Not
got.
by Elizabeth Vincentelli, who's
gave
the
it
critic for
3
the New York
stars.
Post, and Linda Weiner, the other female critic from Newsday, was not unkind to it.
Exactly. No, honestly, I really think it's a case of men not seeing it or being smarmy about it. Ben Brantley in the Times, give me a break. I mean, it was the sarcasm. It just... overdone, and I just had a sense as I was watching it. When I watched saw Wicked for the first time, now I know, Matt, you liked Wicked, but many men didn't.
Not that much.
They didn't get it. And I knew that this was important. Now and then, it's nice to see something that you can get excited about.
I will say this about 9 to 5. If the producers can pull it together, 75% of the people who buy tickets to a Broadway show are women.
Actually, we had 66%. Perhaps it's changing as we speak.
Yeah, right.
Maybe you're considering the gay
vast
men.
majority of people who buy tickets
over
to Broadway
60%.
shows
I know.
are women. And if they can tap into that crowd, I think 9 to 5 can work.
No, I'm alive, I am so alive. If you climb on my back, then we both can fly. If you try to deny me, I'll never die. I'm alive.
I saw Next to Normal off-Broadway last year, and I had problems with it, and I think they've done a lot of terrific work with it out of town, and they have solved most of the problems that I and other people had with it. They've homogenized it a little bit, they've evened it out, they found the right combination of meds, if you will, and they've made it now into what I think is a very powerful show. I think Next to Normal is an emotional show, I think it is an adult show, I think it takes subject matter that you don't usually see in a musical.
A woman who's suffering from bipolar disorder.
From severe psychotic bipolar disorder, really closer to schizophrenia from the what she manifests on stage, and treats it in a serious way, but in an accessible way. And I think that the score really taps into what it's trying to dramatize. I think that the sound of it has a lot of sort of 70s rock influences, which sound like the way the characters would musicalize their own experience.
And John, you weren't taken with this bipolar musical?
No, I loathe Next to Normal. Everything about it is wrong. The book stinks, the lyrics stink, the music super stinks. The set is ridiculous, has nothing to do with anything. I can't say one good word for it, except I like the leading actress.
Next to Normal is a beautiful and brilliant new American musical going into new territory in terms of this bipolar, depressive mother I think it is one of the most.
What do you mean new territory? That's Mama Rose and Gypsy.
Mama Rose was not bipolar. She had a narcissism situation.
Well, there's probably a prescription medication for that now, too.
Yes, but this is really a show that goes into contemporary American culture, to where we are now, to issues of medication, to crisis within the family.
I like Next to Normal. I mean, but I like serious, serious musicals. And this one had really tried to say something about a very touchy topic.
Which is?
Mental illness, how it affects a family. And these guys worked on it, too. I have to give creative team points for working it in New York, looking at the criticism, what critics said about it, taking it out of town, refining the show, and bringing it back to New York, to Broadway, no less. And, Broadway's pretty tough on serious shows.
And Next to Normal for you, Jacques? Are you interested in bipolar disorders?
I rather disliked Next to Normal when it was at second stage. I hated Next to Normal on Broadway. I could barely stand it. And it's this endless thing about this woman and her pharmacologist. I say send them off so they can work out their formulas together. We don't have to sit there and suffer through it. It's a boring, dreadful, shrieking, tearing sort of play that has no relevance for most of the people, although supposedly a lot of people take pharmacological drugs. But really, this was not anything I would want to sit through. I mean, it's really, I hated it. I hated Next to Normal.
Alice Ripley in Next to Normal gives one of these, I think she's going to win the Tony, by the way.
Yes.
I think she's got it down. She gives one of those performances that's on edge. She gives her all. I mean, this woman does not stint. I hope her voice holds out, because it's a tough role, and she's on for just about the entire show.
Everybody's just like Alice Ripley. She has one note that she holds the entire show, and that's all there is to it. It's like, in ER when one of the characters dies and suddenly they could go flat. That's what she does the entire time.
The theatricality is inherent in the amazing performances of that entire cast, including Alice Ripley, who is giving one of the most honest and breathtaking performances I think that we will see in musical theater for a long time.
Sing me a song from Next to Normal.
I'll sing you every song.
No.
I think that Next to Normal deserves a good number of Tony Awards. It deserves to have a nice, healthy run. And if that show is to survive, it's going to be through word of mouth. Because, stuff like the nominations, the reviews, they kind of fan the flames. But it's going to be people saying, you go to see this show because it'll make you feel more than you have with a stupid, meaningless spectacle like 9 to 5 or Shrek.
I had a great time at Shrek. I thought it was very underrated by the critics. It's such a cheeky, funny piece of musical theater. David Lindsay Abair's book is quite amusing and sophisticated. It appeals to children, and yet it has a sophistication for adults. And I had a terrific time.
I totally disagree. I don't know. It just seemed pointless to me. It was just another screen-to-stage adaptation. I didn't find the music very flavorful or interesting at all. And in terms of making changes, all they really did were make some insidery theater jokes.
Yeah, I'm surprised, Susan, that you like Shrek, because you've always been one of these people who champions the underdog, the poor, the struggling artist. And Shrek is this billion-dollar production brought together by $1 billion company, DreamWorks. And here you are talking about as if it were, a spring awakening.
So I went into Shrek with great hostility because it was produced by DreamWorks, and it seemed to be this very privileged piece of adaptive cartoon theater, which Disney has abused so horribly in things like Tarzan and The Little Mermaid. And yet, then I just loved it.
I don't really care where a show comes from. If it comes from a corporate-minded entity like DreamWorks, or if it came from a bunch of struggling producers just barely trying to trek it and make it on, I don't care. That's not for me to really think about. I review what I see. And in terms of Shrek, I saw a pretty uninteresting entity that left me feeling bored and uninvolved and wishing I were at a better musical. I don't know, not a single song from Shrek really stayed with me.
Yeah, sing me one song from Shrek.
Let your freak flag fly.
That's because you've probably been listening to the cast album since he was a tiny
I know
voter.
why she lets
Other thing with me is when they did "I'm a Believer" as the curtain call music.
I love that. That's so wonderful. I'm the believer.
Yeah, and that was a total admission of the inferiority of the score that they had to take.
I see before me our freak flags flying. Most of the critics, the big critics, don't have families, don't have children.
Big critics.
Do you think that sort of blocks them in a way to appreciate something like Shrek, which may be pitched to a family audience and may succeed in pitching to that family audience?
It's an interesting question. I think that you don't have to have a family to have some kind of hold on your inner child, and whether or not you're going to want to let that out. It's up to you. It's up to the critic.
Let your